anyways, yeah. So like Lindley mentioned, I looked at paired mocap and Motus data across a couple metrics, like all the Motus metrics, and then the corresponding mocap metrics that Lindley's talked about, deriving ways, like essentially I'll approach this from like what I kind of did, the methods I used, and then we can kind of talk a little bit about some of the results and why the results could be different from our validation study that was published, and then what we're looking to do for going forward. A lot of the stuff was essentially looking at two main ways of analyzing it. Similar to the study, we focus on reliability, which is colloquially known just as correlational analysis. Do the metrics all increase in the same direction? Do they decrease in the same direction? Like if what, like taking into account user averages, throw averages, repeated measures correlation. So associating some of the intra-individual association, aka like for each individual player, do the metrics directionally correlate? In that case, do they correlate when you look at a clump of people? So I looked at it. I think the number of I took out a couple outliers, a couple of people that were clear outliers. So I was left with about 34 pitchers and around 85 to 90 pitches. Did a lot of visual representation as well, but I did correlations on each throw, correlations on user averages, and then repeated measures correlations, which is again like allowing for the standardization of the lack of independence among the data points that are associated with the same people. So again, measuring kind of within the subject correlation, and probably across the board, numbers were a bit lower than our Motus validation study. Well, a bit, like I was looking at them now. I don't think I'd even spend that much time comparing the magnitudes. Our Varus to torque wasn't too far off.
Yeah.
Arm speeds were a bit lower. Shoulder rotation was still fairly robust. One of our arm stall metrics was pretty decent, but the arm stall metric we found in the Motus validation study was much, correlated much higher. Some of the reasons I kind of came up with, and my theories on why they were different, why the numbers were different. First off, we have a difference in number of subjects and data points. I think when we did the Motus validation study, we had 10 subjects, and that threw fastballs. That threw each like a fastball, or each threw like 3 fastballs and 3 breaking balls.
It was 5. I think it was 5 for each pitch type.
It was 5 for each pitch type? Okay.
I believe so.
Okay. Should probably...
So like a slightly higher...
Yep, you're right. 5 to... It hasn't been 5 to 7. I think we just chose the 5 ones that had the most, that were just to capture the best on mocap. Whereas here, we took like 2 to 3 pitches per guy. And it was mostly, I think the idea was fastballs, right, Lindley?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we just used assessment data for when guys came and assessed. They just threw with a Motus sleep on as well.
Yeah, and also in the validation study, we used just user averages rather than also looking at repeated measures, correlations, that kind of stuff. So what I suspect is that among 2 to 3 throws, maybe the within subject correlation isn't as evident, right? Because one slight misread or one wonky value will just plummet that if there's only 2 to 3 data points. If there's 5 to 7, that's another story. So I suspect that, and plus we used user averages like I mentioned. So I suspect around 5 to 7 throws, maybe the Motus metrics stabilize much better than do at 2 to 3 throws, and matching those of our mocap values in that case would have different relationships. Also, technically our motion capture metrics, some of them are slightly different from, we probably were on pipeline V3 back then, although it was a lot looser and a lot less standardized than it is now.
There was a different model.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I mean by pipeline.
Model definitions is probably a big thing. Even the marker placement.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. So our thoughts, or at least my thoughts that Lindley seemed to agree with as well, is we need to like rerun stuff with more throws, like kind of mocap and Motus larger sessions as a whole, and then match those players across multiple data points, and also talk about varying intent levels as well to see if that is something that impacts like the way numbers trend up and down. So I think like some of the ideas we talked about is having like multiple people, mocap and Motus 5+ throws in a session, have them do multiple sessions. We look at like the variance in that subject across different sessions, potentially varied intensity across those sessions. So we also look at intra-session variance and just like how stable those numbers are with more data points, with different intent levels, and with the same person throwing them on like different days. Yeah. So definitely a couple things in the works. And like, I think the main takeaway for me is there's still work, like, there's still plenty of stuff that we're still doing with Motus in terms of understanding how it works. And it's like a high priority of ours to fully understand it and like have answers for like these questions as well.
Yeah. And hopefully, especially if people using it for workload, primarily that's based on the stress value. And if we want to make sure that the stress value at the very least is good enough.
And the stress value was pretty good. The stress value is like I think our highest correlation around like 0.6 or so.
Mm-hmm. Outside of what I mentioned before about maybe not responding to different ball weights quite correctly, but that's something that we are currently collecting data on.